Hello everyone, I'm James. Tonight's story will shake you to your core. Imagine falling in love with someone so enchanting, so effortlessly perfect, that you thank the universe for finally sending you peace. But behind that beauty, that gentle smile, was a history soaked in vanishing husbands, whispered lies, and quiet death. Her name was Vivian Rose, and her sixth husband, he almost didn't make it out alive. If you think you've seen true crime stories before, think again, because this is something else entirely. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss a single second of this. Evan Miller had been through heartbreak before. His first marriage had ended in betrayal. His wife Dana had been having an affair with his coworker for nearly 2 years. When he confronted her, she didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. "I stopped feeling special," she said. "You made everything too ordinary." Those words crushed Evan, and for 5 long years he shut down. No dating, no distractions, just work and taking care of his aging mother, who was slowly slipping into dementia. By the time he was 38, Evan had given up on love completely. But then Vivian. He only joined the matchmaking agency because his mother insisted. He even considered skipping the meeting. But something made him show up at that little coffee shop on Main Street. And there she was. Ivory dress, soft southern accent, a grace in her walk that made the entire room seem quieter. Evan said it was like something clicked inside him, like the air changed. After the 3rd date, he told his best friend Kyle, "She's unlike anyone I've ever met." And she was. Vivian had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. She remembered everything: his coffee order, the year he broke his ankle in college, and even the Beatles song that made him tear up. She didn't laugh at him. She held his hand. 3 months later, they were engaged. By month 5, they stood beneath a rose-covered arch in a small chapel just outside Asheville, North Carolina, exchanging vows in front of a dozen close friends and almost no family. Kyle thought that was strange. "Where's her family?" he whispered to Evan before the ceremony. "She says it's just her and a cousin in Michigan," Evan replied. "Most of them passed. She's not close to the rest." Kyle didn't press. He didn't want to ruin the day, but something about her bothered him. Vivian was too perfect, too polished. She moved through life like someone who had practiced every smile, every sorrow, and for some reason that scared him. After the ceremony, over a glass of bourbon, Kyle did what any best friend would do. He started digging. Vivian's name wasn't rare, but when he typed in Vivian Rose plus marriage plus missing, a few strange links came up. 2 obituaries, both listing a woman named Vivian as the spouse of men who were now gone. No foul play was mentioned, no family statements, just quiet deaths and vague private arrangements. Kyle's stomach turned. He looked up. Across the patio, under the warm glow of string lights, Evan was dancing with his new bride. Vivian's head rested gently on his shoulder. Her eyes were closed. She looked peaceful, too peaceful. And that was the beginning. It was supposed to be the honeymoon phase, candlelit dinners, long walks, whispered promises in the dark. But just 10 days after the wedding, Evan Miller felt something crack. It was a Tuesday evening in Carolina, the sky heavy with clouds, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp soil. Evan had left work early, wanting to surprise Vivian with dinner. He wasn't exactly a chef, but he remembered her favorite dish, chicken piccata. He stepped inside their cozy home, expecting the usual, the scent of lavender candles, maybe soft jazz playing in the background. But tonight, silence. No lights, no music, and no sign of Vivian. That's when he heard a dull thump from downstairs. His heart skipped. The basement? Vivian always kept it locked, said it was full of junk and bad memories. She never let him in. And yet the door was slightly ajar. Cautiously, he stepped down the creaking stairs. The air grew colder, mustier. Boxes lined the walls, labeled with perfect handwriting: winter coats, old books, photos. But one box stood out, shoved clumsily behind a shelf, no label, only a black smudge. He reached for it. Evan, a voice pierced the silence like a blade. He jumped, turned. There she was, Vivian, standing at the top of the stairs, her face in shadow. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice calm, too calm, but her eyes locked onto the box in his hands. I thought I heard something. The door was open." She descended slowly. The silk of her robe whispered against the wooden railing. "That box isn't important," she said softly, placing a hand on the lid and pressing it shut. "Just old tax stuff." Evan nodded, said nothing, but inside his gut twisted like a knot. That night she was unusually tender. She massaged his shoulders, poured him a whiskey, lit a fire. She kissed him gently and whispered, "Let's not keep secrets, remember." Oh, God. He hadn't even seen what was in the box, but the way she reacted, it wasn't right. 3 days later, Kyle called. "You still want to know what?" I found his voice was low, tense. Evan stepped outside, away from Vivian's ever-watchful gaze. "I'm listening." "I found 2 obituaries," Kyle said. 2 guys both married to women named Vivian, or at least women who went by that name. One in Georgia, one in Oregon, both just gone. "No foul play?" Evan asked. "Nope, just vague accidents. No public records, no investigations, just poof." One of the guys, Mark Shell, his brother posted about him on a missing persons forum years ago, said he always thought the wife had something to do with it. There was a pause. Then Kyle said, "I swear to God, Evan, the wedding photo, it's her. Same eyes, same smile, same everything." Evan sat down on the porch step, his hands shaking. What was this? He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "You need to be careful," Kyle warned. "Play it cool, but keep your eyes open. And listen, Evan, if she ever gives you anything to drink that smells off, don't touch it." That night, Evan couldn't sleep. Vivian lay next to him like a porcelain doll, perfect, unmoving, serene. But his mind raced. Who was she? Why were there no childhood photos, no social media, no real family? Every trace of her before 2010 was like a ghost trail. And the worst part, he still wanted to believe it wasn't true, that she was just a little mysterious, a little private. But deep down, something darker had taken root, and it was growing. 3 days later, Evan made his move. Vivian left for her weekly book club meeting, the same one she mentioned every Thursday like clockwork. She kissed him on the cheek, told him not to wait up, and walked out the front door with her usual calm grace. The moment her car disappeared around the curve, Evan was in motion. He unlocked the basement. The door creaked like it had been holding its breath. This time he didn't hesitate. The mysterious box was right where it had been shoved behind a shelf like an afterthought. He dragged it out and opened the lid. What he found made his blood run cold. Inside were old passports, not 1, but 5. Each had Vivian's face, but with different names. Different identities, different lives. Marriage certificates, 6 of them. 1 of them, his. Then came the newspaper clippings, yellowed with age, blurred headlines. Local man disappears. Days after wedding wife declines a comment. Foul play not suspected. The dates ranged across more than a decade. Oregon, Georgia, Ohio, Pennsylvania. And then, at the very bottom, a small velvet box. Evan's hands were trembling as he lifted the lid. Inside, neatly arranged in a perfect row, were 5 identical gold wedding bands, polished, preserved, souvenirs. Oh my God, she kept them, all of them. A chill shot down his spine. He wasn't her first. He wasn't her second. He was husband number 6. And no one had made it past 5. That night, he said nothing. When Vivian returned, she found him curled up on the couch, eyes closed, pretending to nap. She walked over, leaned down, and kissed his forehead. "Long day," she whispered. He nodded, kept his eyes shut, and forced a smile. but his heart was pounding. Later, she brought him tea. Chamomile, his favorite. He hadn't asked for it. She sat across from him, legs tucked under her, her voice gentle and warm. "You've been tense lately," she said. "I thought this might help." He took the cup with shaking hands, brought it to his lips, hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. Her smile didn't change. She didn't blink. She just waited. He pretended to sip, let the steam brush his nose. Immediately he caught at a faint bitterness beneath the floral scent, metallic, sharp, wrong. His throat clenched. "Hot," he croaked, setting the cup down. "Too hot." She nodded. "Take your time." She got up and began folding a blanket, humming softly. He slipped to the kitchen, dumped the tea down the sink, rinsed the cup, then refilled it with water and brought it back. She didn't say a word. But minutes later, everything went black. He woke up hours later on the floor of their bedroom, his head pounding, vision blurred, limbs heavy like soaked towels. Vivian sat at the edge of the bed watching him quietly. "I know you didn't drink all of it," she said softly, "but you drank enough." Evan tried to move nothing. His arms wouldn't lift, his voice caught in his throat. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said, her voice calm. Not angry, not cruel, just disappointed. "But you were prying." Her eyes were cold now, clear. "You looked in the box," she whispered. "I saw the scuff marks on the floor. You were careful, but not careful enough." She reached out, brushed the hair from his damp forehead. "I should end it now," she said. "That would be smart, clean." Evan's body screamed, but nothing worked. Then she leaned closer. "But here's the thing, Evan," she whispered. "You're the only one who ever looked." Her breath was warm on his cheek. "The others, they trusted me. They made me feel invisible, like I was just part of the furniture." She smiled, but it wasn't kind. "But not you." He closed his eyes. Waiting for the pain, waiting for the cold, waiting for death. Instead, she kissed his cheek. "Let's try again," she said. "Maybe you'll understand me better this time." And just like that, she left the room. He woke at dawn still fully dressed. No bruises, no cuts, no visible damage, only the bitter taste still on his tongue and the horror now carved into his soul. Vivian was in the kitchen humming frying eggs. "Morning, sleepyhead," she called sweetly. "You passed out last night. Stress catching up with you." He stared at her numb. She walked over, kissed his cheek. "I'm glad you're okay." Evan sat down at the table, hands trembling beneath the wood. She could have killed him. She didn't. But something inside her had shifted, and something inside him had snapped. From that moment on, Evan Miller wasn't a husband anymore. He was a survivor. Evan Miller was no longer a man in love. He was a man preparing for war. In the days that followed, he played his role to perfection. The devoted husband, the affectionate partner, the grateful man who believed he didn't deserve someone as perfect as Vivian. But inside, he was planning. First, he bought a set of hidden cameras online. They looked like phone chargers. One went into the bedroom, one in the kitchen, another near the basement door, each one discreet, undetectable. Every night, he backed up the footage onto a separate hard drive labeled Work Reports. Every detail, every glance, every cup of tea, recorded. Then he called Kyle. "I need your help," Evan whispered into the phone. "She's dangerous." Kyle didn't hesitate. He drove in from Atlanta that weekend and showed up pretending to be the same old best friend, loud laugh, six-pack of beer in hand, asking where the remote was. But their real conversation happened outside. Under the guise of admiring the garden, they stood at the edge of the backyard. "I found 5 rings," Evan muttered, "and fake passports, all of them with her face, different names, every one of those men vanished after marrying her. Kyle clenched his jaw. This isn't just weird anymore. This is serial. I know, Evan said. What's your plan? Evan took a breath. I'm going to let her try, and I'm going to catch her in the act. Kyle's eyes widened. Are you out of your mind? Evan looked down. I have to know. I need proof. I need them to believe me, because right now she's a ghost. No fingerprints, no paper trail, just charm and ashes. The setup began that same week. Evan started pretending to get sick. At first, it was subtle. He told Vivian he wasn't sleeping well, that he felt dizzy, that maybe it was work stress. She responded with the same warmth as always, brushing his hair back, tucking him into bed, whispering sweet nothings. Let me take care of you, she cooed. Just rest, sweetheart. She brought him soup. She made tea, always chamomile. She suggested he skip meals and lie down more. One evening she even said, Don't worry, love. I'll call the doctor if you're not better by next week. That was the moment Evan knew. She was planning something. The next time she gave him tea, he waited until she turned to water the porch plants. Then he poured the liquid into a plastic bag, sealed it, and placed it in the freezer. He labeled it chicken stock. He mailed it to Kyle, who had a contact in a private lab. 2 days later, the results came in. Zolpidem, Kyle said over the phone. A massive dose, enough to knock you out cold. If you had alcohol in your system, could have stopped your heart. Evan closed his eyes. His suspicion was real. She wasn't just odd. She was trying to kill him. And she was doing it slowly. Carefully. Like she had before. The plan was now clear. Evan would let her believe he was getting weaker, more tired, more trusting. And when the moment came, he'd be ready. On the third Friday since his discovery, Vivian suggested they celebrate their mini-month anniversary. She brought home dinner, bourbon-glazed salmon, his favorite, wine, and of course lemon cake. She smiled as she poured him a drink. To us, she said, raising her glass. Evan smiled back. To us. But he didn't drink. He only let the wine touch his lips, then set the glass down, pretending to be exhausted. I think I'll head to bed early, he said. She kissed his forehead. I'll clean up down here. Upstairs, Evan changed into the clothes he'd prepped, an old shirt, soaked lightly in cold water, and a dash of corn syrup to simulate sweat. He lay in bed, slowed his breathing, and waited. 10 minutes later, the stairs creaked. She entered like a shadow. He peeked through nearly shut eyelids and saw her figure approach the bed. She leaned in close, her breath brushing his skin. Sleep tight, Evan, she whispered. It'll all be over soon. Then she left the room. Downstairs he heard movement, furniture scraping, a heavy clang, a metallic thud. She was preparing something. He grabbed his phone from under the pillow and tapped the Bluetooth trigger. The hidden basement camera began streaming live to Kyle's laptop in Atlanta. Kyle, already waiting, called the local sheriff, who had been fully briefed, evidence in hand. Evan crept down the stairs. He didn't make a sound. Through the narrow crack of the basement door, he saw her. She was lifting something large, wrapped in a tarp, placing it into the deep freezer. She pulled out a syringe from her robe pocket and muttered, "Just one more night." Evan stepped out. "Looking for this," he said, holding the phone with the live feed running. Vivian froze. Slowly she turned to him, eyes wide, not with panic, but with calculation. "You're supposed to be asleep," she said, voice almost amused. "I bet they all were," Evan replied coldly. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then she lunged. She lunged with everything she had, claws out, teeth bared, like something no longer pretending to be human. Evan dodged just in time. The syringe in her hand missed his neck by an inch, plunging into empty air. He grabbed her wrist and twisted hard. She shrieked not in pain, but rage, raw, guttural, animalistic rage. She kicked, bit, scratched. Her strength was unreal, but Evan held on. "Drop it," he shouted, breathless. She smiled. "You don't get it, do you?" "Get off her," a voice thundered. Flashlights burst into the room as deputies stormed through the front door, weapons drawn, voices loud and commanding. "Put your hands where I can see them." Vivian didn't resist. She simply froze, eyes wide, chest heaving, and then slowly raised her arms in surrender. The syringe clattered to the floor. One deputy moved to cuff her. "Be careful," Evan warned, still gasping. "She's smarter than she looks." "She's not the first pretty sociopath we've dealt with," the deputy muttered, but even he looked back at her twice uneasy. She said nothing. She didn't scream, she didn't beg, she didn't ask why. She just smiled. That same unsettling smile she wore the night she drugged Evan. It wasn't over yet, not even close. The investigation began that very night. Down in the basement, police opened the deep freezer. What they found inside silenced the room. It wasn't food. It wasn't ice. It was ashes. 5 vacuum-sealed bags each labeled with a name and year in faded black marker. Mark Shelley, 2013, Daniel Ross, 2014, Anthony Lively, 2016, Henry Morris, 2018, David Quinn, 2020. All husbands, all vanished, all presumed missing. Until now. The horror didn't stop there. Behind a false panel in the basement wall, officers discovered a small, temperature-controlled vault. Inside cufflinks, love letters, watches, wedding photos, passports, mementos from each man. Each item carefully labeled, organized. Cherished. A detective stared at the vault for a long time before whispering, "This isn't just murder. This is ritual." Evan stood in the corner, still shaking, his back pressed to the cold concrete wall. He stared at one particular watch. He recognized it. Vivian once wore it to dinner, said it was a gift from an uncle. It belonged to Mark Shelley, her first recorded victim. Kyle arrived minutes later, wide-eyed, breathless. He took one look at Evan and asked, "You okay, man?" Evan nodded, barely. "She almost got me," he whispered. At the station, Vivian didn't say a word for hours. She didn't ask for a lawyer. She didn't demand a phone call. She just sat there. Perfect posture, hands folded, calm. Then just after midnight, she spoke. "I never lied," she said. "They knew who I was. I was the best thing that ever happened to them." Detective Morales leaned forward. "You killed them." She tilted her head slightly. "No," she said, "I freed them." The story broke nationwide the next morning. Black widow arrested in North Carolina, linked to 5 missing husbands. The media descended like vultures, cameras outside the house, news vans swarming the police station. Online forums exploded. Who was this woman? How did she do it? How did no one stop her? And then her real name surfaced. Vivian Rose was a lie. Her real name was Lillian Monroe. Born in 1981, orphaned in a fire that killed her parents. Or so the story went. The fire had been ruled accidental, faulty wiring. But one thing stood out in the original report, the faint smell of gasoline on Lillian's clothes. She was 6. No charges were filed. From there, she vanished into the foster care system. Over 10 years, she cycled through 9 different homes. Every case file filled with red flags. Aggression, manipulation, violence. One therapist wrote, "Lillian mimics emotion, but she does not feel it." Another warned, "She thrives when adored. She becomes dangerous when ignored." At 17, she disappeared from her final foster placement. At 20, she reemerged in Oregon under a new name. Veronica Ray. And a year later, her first husband vanished. The deeper investigators dug, the darker the picture became. Lillian Monroe or Vivian Rose Veronica Ray or any of her other aliases hadn't just reinvented herself once or twice. She had built entire lives from scratch, identities forged to perfection, past erased with surgical precision. 7 aliases, 7 lives, 6 confirmed husbands. Only one had survived. Each marriage followed a chilling pattern. Meet, charm, marry, isolate, kill, disappear. She never stayed in one place for more than 2 years, and she never left behind a body. Until Evan. The most disturbing discovery wasn't the ashes. It wasn't even the vault filled with trinkets and trophies. It was the journals. Dozens of cream-colored leather notebooks bound with red ribbon, stored neatly beneath the floorboards in a sealed wooden box. Each book was labeled with a year, inside meticulous writing in delicate cursive. Every man had his own chapter. Every marriage documented. Every murder narrated. But what chilled detectives the most wasn't the confession. It was the tone. There was no rage, no regret, no excuses. Just logic, observations, calculation. In one entry, she wrote Mark was kind but dull. He forgot anniversaries. He left dishes in the sink. One night he raised his voice. I gave him 3 warnings. The 4th came with a drink. Another read, Henry cried when I said I was leaving. Weakness disgusts me. He asked if I still loved him. I said yes. Then I smiled and made tea. She didn't kill for money. She never drained their accounts. She didn't run with their assets. She killed for something else. Control, order, a sense of power. Each mistake they made documented, ticked off, weighed like sins. Detective Morales spent hours reading through her writings. When he finally looked up from the last page, his hands were shaking. She didn't kill because she was angry, he muttered. She killed because she thought it was maintenance. One notebook was entirely dedicated to psychological manipulation. She wrote about control like it was a science. Give affection. Then take it away. Reward loyalty with touch. Punish doubt with silence. Make them forget who they were before they met you. She even kept scores, how long it took each man to stop opening her car door. How often he interrupted her. How quickly he reached for his phone during dinner. Every slip was a strike. Every offense tallied. Every emotional failure judged. To her, love was a contract, and breaking it carried the ultimate penalty. The journal labeled 2025 was unfinished. It contained only a handful of entries all about Evan. He's clever, she wrote. I underestimated him. He notices too much, moves too quietly. I began testing him earlier than usual. When he found the box, I let him believe he was safe. I wanted to see what he would do, whether he would run or fight. When he passed out from the tea, I could have ended it. But something about him was different, symmetrical, like he saw the outline of me even if he didn't understand the design. It was admiration, a kind of twisted respect. Evan wasn't just another man. He was the first to survive. But who had she been before all of this? That answer came from court records, psychiatric files, and child welfare documents long buried in archives. She was 6 years old when her house caught fire. Her parents died in their sleep. Lillian was found in the hallway, not a burn on her. The fire was ruled accidental, but the fire marshal noted 2 odd details: a spent matchbox under her bed and gasoline residue on her pajamas. No charges were filed. She was too young. The case was closed. Between the ages of 7 and 17, she lived in 9 different homes. Every placement ended in behavioral issues. One therapist wrote Lillian exhibits an unusual detachment from consequences. She mimics emotions well, but lacks true empathy. Another warned she thrives when she is adored, But when that attention fades, she begins to dismantle the source. At 15, she pushed a foster brother down a flight of stairs. He survived with a shattered leg. By 17, she vanished. No forwarding address, no one looked for her. 2 years later, she reappeared in Oregon as Veronica Ray. She worked in a flower shop, rented a studio above a bakery, dated a college professor named Derek Malone. He vanished 6 months later. That death wasn't documented in any journal. But buried in the margins of a later notebook, investigators found one line. The first goodbye is always the quietest. Back in the present, Evan tried to rebuild. He moved out of the house, bought a cabin deep in the mountains, no neighbors, no distractions, no memories. But sleep never came easy. He still saw her in dreams wearing white, standing at the foot of the bed, smiling with that same terrifying softness. 6 months later, a letter arrived. No return address, just his name, written in familiar cursive. Inside, "Dear Evan, I replay the moment you found the box again and again. The way your hand shook, the way you still kissed me goodnight. You were brave. You passed the test. They never did. You're my favorite goodbye. V." He burned the letter. But her presence never really left. Vivian Rose, or rather Lillian Monroe, was sentenced to life in federal prison with no possibility of parole. The courtroom was silent when the verdict was read. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She smiled. Life behind bars was supposed to be the end of her story. But for a woman like her, it was just the beginning. She was transferred to a high-security federal facility in West Virginia. Cameras monitored every hallway. Guards worked in pairs. Inmates were limited to structured routines, supervised recreation, and tightly controlled communication. But none of that mattered. Within 2 weeks, she knew everyone's name: guards, nurses, inmates. She knew who was going through a divorce, who had a sick child, who took antidepressants, who had just started a night shift job and hated it. She didn't flirt. That would have been too obvious. Instead, she listened. She observed. And she waited. Officer Ryan Griggs was new. Young, by the book, fit, a little too eager. But he had that familiar look, the kind of man who didn't feel seen. Vivian saw it immediately. She never touched him, never made a move, but she asked how his night was, asked if he was sleeping okay, said softly one day, "You remind me of someone I once loved. He had kind hands, too." He didn't reply. But the next morning she found an extra packet of sugar with her tea. By the 3rd week he lingered outside her cell. She didn't speak. She just smiled. Let the silence say what her words never would. A few nights later, Officer Griggs stood outside the warden's office. He didn't knock. He didn't enter. He just stared at the door for 7 full minutes. Then turned and walked away. No one knew what he was thinking. But 2 days after that, Vivian received a second blanket, a luxury in winter months. Then her mail started arriving uncensored. Then came the moment that nearly blew her cover. A nurse found her sitting alone in the prison library, reading a file she wasn't supposed to have. When questioned, she simply said it was sitting there. I assumed it was meant for me. No one could prove anything. But security rotated the staff that week. And Officer Griggs, quietly reassigned to the medical wing on night shift. He never said goodbye. But he did leave her a note under her cell door. "You were right. They don't see me, but you did." She folded the note, added it to her collection. She didn't need to escape. She didn't need knives or fists or blood. She needed one thing: access, and someone to listen. Layla Torres was just 19. Arrested for grand theft auto and assault. Foster kid, abandonment issues, violent temper. She met Vivian in the infirmary, both waiting for medication. Vivian had bruises from a fall. Layla had split her knuckles punching a wall. They didn't speak at first. But Vivian noticed everything. How Layla wouldn't look people in the eyes. How she flinched when anyone walked behind her. How she spit on the floor every time a male guard walked by. One day, Vivian whispered, "Anger is a leash. You just keep handing them the handle." Layla froze. "What did you say?" Vivian didn't repeat it. She just smiled. Layla didn't spit that day. In the weeks that followed, Layla and Vivian were coincidentally assigned to the same yard times, the same lunch table, the same recreation blocks. Vivian never lectured. She just made observations. "You're not broken," she said one afternoon. "You're just sharp. And the world fears sharp girls." Layla started watching her, then following her, then imitating her. By the third week, she stopped fighting the guards. She requested books. She started writing. Not about her crimes. Just thoughts, quotes, rules. She even began using a different name with the guards, V. One day, a nurse found a note under Layla's pillow. Some rot in cages, some hide, some build legacies. V. No one could prove it came from Vivian. No one could stop it either. Back in the mountains, Evan was trying to live. He had moved to a more isolated cabin. No phone line, no internet. He chopped his own wood, read old crime novels, tried to forget. But he still flinched at the smell of chamomile. Still avoided white dresses. Still woke up gasping from dreams where she kissed him and said, "I'll be better next time." 3 weeks after Layla's note was discovered, Evan received another letter. No return address, no postmark. Just his name, in her handwriting. Inside a single line, "You're still my favorite, goodbye." He burned it. But it didn't matter, because she never needed to be near him to haunt him. Time passed. The headlines faded. The media frenzy died down, but for Evan Miller, the story never truly ended. He tried dating again. 6 months after the trial, encouraged by his therapist and nudged by well-meaning friends, Evan agreed to dinner with a woman named Celeste. She was kind, smart, warm. She smiled with her eyes. But when she reached across the table to touch his hand, he flinched. Hard. He apologized. She smiled politely, but the spark was gone. The date ended early. He never called her again. He developed psychosomatic symptoms. The smell of chamomile made him nauseous. Dimly lit kitchens triggered panic attacks. He couldn't drink from mugs anymore, only bottled water, unopened, sealed. He kept a flashlight under his pillow. He checked every lock twice, sometimes 3 times. He stopped using candles entirely. He couldn't stand the flicker. He never bought lemon cake again. But the worst part wasn't fear. It was doubt. Not about her, about himself. How could he not have seen it? How could he have loved her? He kept the letter, the one she sent from prison. Sometimes he swore it still smelled like her perfume. Other times he told himself that was just his mind playing tricks. Once he brought it close to a candle flame. But at the last second, he pulled it back. Some scars you fold, others that you frame. In group therapy, someone once asked, "What makes a survivor different from a victim?" Evan didn't answer at the time. But days later, he wrote in his journal, "A victim dies once. A survivor dies 1,000 times, every time they wake up from a dream, every time they touch a memory, every time they wonder if it's really over, but they keep breathing." He moved again, farther into the mountains. No neighbors, no mailbox, no noise. He built furniture by hand, chopped his own wood, lived simply, quietly. People thought he was running, but he wasn't. He was making space not to forget her, but to survive her. To give her memory a room in the house, but not the whole damn floor. Then one spring morning, Evan found another letter. It wasn't mailed. It was tucked into the screen door. No stamp, no return address, just a single sheet of paper, torn from a journal. He unfolded it slowly. You were always the exception, and even now, I wonder what you're building out there. Maybe it's peace. Maybe it's a trap. V. He stood in the doorway for a long time. Then, without a word, he walked over to the wood stove and fed the paper to the flames. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't call Kyle, didn't go to therapy that week, didn't write in his journal. He just kept working, cutting lumber, sanding edges, listening to the wind press against the windows. Because she was still behind bars, but part of her would always be watching. Not through glass, not through letters, but through the quiet echo she left in the back of his mind. The whisper that said, you were chosen, you were loved, you were spared. She didn't need freedom. She didn't need a key. All she needed was to be remembered. And she was.